Let me start first with liability. Is liability an issue, at least in the year 2012? Absolutely it is. It's very much an issue. And in fact, in today's challenging economy, I would truly believe that liability is a bigger issue than it's ever been. Why? Well, I think that in today's challenging economy, you've got unemployment. It's getting better, but there's still pretty high unemployment out there. And with it, fewer people have health insurance now. What does that mean? It means that if they're injured, they're less likely to be able to afford their medical bills. As a result, I believe the incentive is there for the injured customer to sue you, maybe even your injured assistant, if you don't have workers' comp insurance, to sue you to recoup at a minimum the cost of their medical bills. Now, having said that, I know that some of you out there are thinking, well, what about the people who do have insurance? If there is insurance that a person has, a customer of yours, for example, that would pay medical bills, does that eliminate your risk of being sued? Well, of course not. In fact, I'm hearing, although I haven't encountered this personally, that the situations are happening around the country where health insurance companies pay a claim for injuries and recovery and rehab, and then they happen to ask a question to their insured party, the one who had the injury. And the health insurance company will ask, so tell us, how were you hurt? And the answer comes out, well, as a matter of fact, I was receiving a riding lesson at a facility owned by, and then your name comes out. And what I'm hearing, and the theory is there, and it's very possible that it's true, what I'm hearing is that these health insurance companies are accepting the right to sue you on behalf of your client. Your client may not want to sue you, but by virtue of their health insurance coverage, the insurance company may have the right to force the issue. So granted, I began by saying that this bad economy is finding more people with no health insurance seeking to recoup their costs. Well, how? By suing you? We understand that the risk certainly is still there, that the insurance companies could be coming after you too, or so I've heard. So what do you do about this? Well, the risk, of course, as I've mentioned, is there. And I know that some of you in this industry, some of you listening, may be looking at the fact that your overhead is getting higher than it's ever been right now. The cost of hay is going through the roof. And you're finding right now that your profit margins are becoming less. You're getting squeezed right now in this economy with all of these overhead expenses going up. So against this backdrop of the, as I submit, elevated risk of liability, and of course equine professionals looking for ways to cut their overhead, some of you may be looking at some ways to cut your overhead to the point where it hurts you. I'll get in a moment to what you need to know, but I want you to be aware of a few things that you should not do. And one is this: don't take the position that in this difficult economy you can't afford to get a good contract developed. You can, and you really should. Good contracts can protect you. They can eliminate disputes in some instances. If you have a well-written release of liability, the signer is of proper age, and your state is a good state to enforce them. Keep in mind, too, that now that the economy is bad and now that maybe you're taking in more customers at lower rates, you may be increasing your risk of liability. More people, greater risk. By no means should any of you on this call decrease your attention to safety. This is a time for all of you to be as vigilant as you have ever been about enforcing a safe environment. Have some stable rules posted if you're a boarding stable or a training stable and people are coming out using, riding, handling, driving their horses on your property. Get those rules up and be vigilant about enforcing them. Some of the rules out there, by the way, I'm told, are rules that involve children. Children. Now, as you want to become friendly and make your place a happy place for more people to come and do business, maybe you're getting a little bit lax about children. As your boarders come and bring their kids who wander around the property, don't do that. This would be a good time to make sure that you have rules requiring that children be supervised by an adult. Not you. You can specify that every boarder, every customer must have supervision for all children under, and you can specify the age. Some of you also, as you're being squeezed in this economy, are thinking of ways to keep your clients happy. Some of them, for example, are approaching you and they're asking you, can I clean stalls? Can I help with turnout as a way of reducing my board fees? And it's awfully tempting because this is work that you may not want to do. I caution all of you on this call. If you're thinking of doing something like that as a way of cutting your overhead expense so you don't have to hire people, be aware of the legal ramifications. I've heard of it happening, and I've actually handled it myself, where a stable gets sued by one of those boarders who gets kicked, injured, or even worse from a horse that they're handling. And it gets even worse for people like you on this call, because these customers of yours who are exchanging services might be viewed as employees under your policy of liability insurance. And if that happens, if you don't have workers' comp insurance, your policy of liability insurance might say, we're out. You have an employee here. And that can be a huge issue and a huge problem. So take great caution before you allow your customers to start doing different things on the premises, such as chores, cleaning stalls, letting horses out, or anything else that puts them in contact with the horses. Oh, and finally, before we get to what you need to know, aside from what I've already shared, this is absolutely no time to cancel or reduce your liability insurance. Keep in mind that your liability insurance is valuable. It's there at a minimum to give you a legal defense if you ever get a claim brought against you from somebody who is injured on the premises. The legal defense costs alone can be so expensive. Let your insurance company take care of that. And in the worst case scenario, if you have to settle the dispute, or even if you lose at trial, if your insurance covers the incident, you've got coverage. And that's reason for you to make sure that you have that protection. So as I close this part on liability, what do you need to know? Well, take these few points with you before we move on. Understand first that liability is with us, and the risk of litigation against you, as far as I'm concerned, is not decreasing. It's still there. Next, make sure you have proper liability insurance, and make sure it covers all of your activities. Some of you on this call, for example, may very well have had a small private horse facility, only keeping your own horses. Maybe you did that for years. But with the economy being the way it is, maybe you've thought about taking on some boarders for a little bit of extra income to help make your expenses. Watch out. Remember, I started talking about insurance, and what I want to caution you about, if you're like that, is maybe all you had before you took on a couple of boarders was homeowners liability insurance. And that's the insurance type policy that covers social guests and people on the premises, but not there for a business purpose. But here you are now. You now have a business. You've just started a small, maybe only 2 customers, maybe even 1, but a business activity, taking on boarding of horses for money. Your insurance policy, if you still have homeowners insurance, will look at you as having a business. You've got business pursuits exclusions in your homeowners policy, and most policies have that exclusion. So what does that mean? It means for anybody on this call who is thinking, my God, that's me, that's exactly who she's talking about, talk to your insurance agent about securing and paying for commercial liability insurance. That is to say business insurance. Because even if you only take on a boarder or 2, well, you're still a business in the eyes of the law and certainly under your insurance policy. What else do you need to know before I move on to the equine liability laws for a moment? Well, you need to know that well-written contracts and releases are really an absolute must. You can make a good contract, preferably with the assistance of a trained attorney, but you can also even look at your contract and find that there are omissions, things that you need to put in them. I'll cover a few of them as I continue, but the final point I make on that is make sure you have well-written contracts. And one other point I have to share with you, I actually worked on a lawsuit, 2 of them over the years, where the equine professional had very well-written contracts. But in one lawsuit that I represented the stable on, it went out of business, and it threw out all of its contracts, including releases. So we didn't have it when that lawsuit came in. And then there was another one. A very well-known stable on the East Coast was sued by a customer, and it had very good contracts. The stable was very good at papering everything, but the contracts were kept in the stable's office. Everybody had access to the stable's office, and guess what? Just before the lawsuit was filed, the contract disappeared. And why is that? Well, you can probably figure it out. The suspicion is, and we'll never be able to prove it, that the one who filed the suit went into the office, snuck in, pulled out their release, and took it away. So my suggestion to all of you who use contracts, guard them with your life. Keep them off premises. If you need information from them, say it's a boarding contract, for example, and it has information on the insurance, mortality insurance of a horse, put the information that you need down in the stable office, maybe even on the stall card, but get the contracts off premises, and please don't destroy them.